partner, and so on. But there are a small group of burglars that are sexually motivated, where the burglary itself is motivated by an urge to look, sexual stimulation through looking. And since about 50% of burglaries occur in the evening when the victim is likely to be home, it's very easy to see the progression from voyeurism to break-in entry to sexual assault or to sexual murder.
By May 1985, Richard Ramirez had killed at least 8 times, and his violent home invasions were about to escalate, plunging the people of Los Angeles into panic. In 1985, Los Angeles County was in the grip of a vicious serial killer. Ordinary citizens were no longer safe in their homes, as the mysterious killer, christened the Night Stalker, raped, murdered and mutilated in the name of Satan. The dreadful and indiscriminate crimes caused a wave of fear.
Everybody was scared. Everybody in the county of Los Angeles and Southern California was scared to death.
Gun sales seriously went up. Vast increase in gun sales. During the summer of '85, people were keeping their windows closed.
It was a very, very hot summer. I would not open the windows at night. We sweltered in our house every night because I was afraid somebody'd come in and kill me.
And still the violent attacks continued. In Burbank, on May the 30th, a 41-year-old woman was raped, while her 12-year-old son was locked, handcuffed in a closet. She was allowed to live. On the 27th of June, the body of a 28-year-old teacher was found in Arcadia. She'd been sodomized and her throat slit. On July the 2nd, again in Arcadia, a 75-year-old woman was found dead. She'd been beaten, her throat cut, and her home ransacked. Detective Gil Carrillo was convinced just one man was at work, but the facts flew in the face of received wisdom.
Here he was crossing all the gamuts, and the only consistency was his inconsistency in the way he was committing his crimes.
What the FBI was telling us is that serial killers tend to operate in the same way. They'll use the same weapon over and over, the same method of operation. But there were different weapons used. There were 2 separate guns that were used throughout these events. There were knives used on a couple of the occasions. There were bludgeons used on a couple of the occasions. These are all differences in the method of operation.
On July the 5th, the Night Stalker targeted a quiet suburban street in Sierra Madre. He entered the bedroom of 16-year-old schoolgirl Whitney Bennett.
You talk about a nightmare. Her parents awakened to her crying and coming down the hall. They find her in her bedroom on the floor, covered in blood. The suspect had entered the house, confronted her in bed while she was asleep, and beat her with a tire iron, and tried to strangle her and left her for dead. 4 feet of sutures ended up in her head, took to close the wound. As you work these cases, or you're in law enforcement for a long period of time, you see a lot, and it has to have an effect on you. I know it takes its toll somewhere down the line. I've seen it.
The 7th of July was another in a long run of swelteringly hot nights.
I'm home alone. It's the first time that I've ever slept with my gun on the nightstand.
Everybody was afraid and pretty much kept their doors locked, windows locked, but the night was so hot and our summer was so hot, so here I had the doors open.
In the middle of the night, Detective Carrillo awoke, convinced the night stalker was in his own house.
I woke up, I was sweating, I was nauseated, and I got my gun and I cleared my house as if I was looking for a burglar. All of a sudden the phone rang, I scared the bejesus out of me, and it was my desk telling me to call my friend Linda.
In the early hours, crime scene investigator Linda Martinez had awoke with a start.
About 3 o'clock in the morning, my friend said, someone's calling your name, somebody's yelling for you.
Linda's neighbor was crying out for help.
I went to the back fence and called across the street to the lady calling me and asked her what was wrong. And she told me that she had been robbed and raped and she was handcuffed to her bed. Once I heard her voice, I knew it was him.
Sophie Dickman, a lady in her 60s, had been sexually assaulted. She was raped and
Detective Carrillo recognized all the hallmarks of a night stalker attack.
I learned that he had verbalized words that were common that we had heard in the past, words he had spoke there. Where's the money, where's the jewelry? Shut up, bitch. There was no doubt in my mind we were dealing with the same guy.
His suspicions were confirmed by the discovery in a nearby home of the 61-year-old Joyce Nelson, beaten to death with a blunt object. The night stalker had struck twice in one night. And he would repeat the trick just 2 weeks later, on the 20th of July, first shooting Max and Layla Needing at their home in Glendale, before moving on to Sun Valley.
We had a couple that lived in a home. The male had been executed in his sleep. The woman had been sexually assaulted. And there was a young boy there that also had been assaulted.
Ramirez had again dispatched the husband as he slept. He had repeatedly beaten, sexually assaulted, and humiliated the mother, demanding that she pray to Satan for her life, and then raped her 8-year-old son.
It was not enough just to murder or to rape. He had to torture, and he loved to terrorize him. He would make him say, "Hail Satan."
Humiliation of victims is very, very typical in serial sexual homicide. This is arousing to them. This reassures the offender that they are in such complete control that they can degrade and humiliate the victim any way they want. Nothing could be more stimulating for an individual with this deviant sexual arousal pattern.
No one was able to predict or prevent the night stalker's crimes.
It's typical of serial killers to choose people who put themselves at risk somehow, like male or female prostitutes, like hitchhikers. But these other people, they were living their normal lives. They weren't doing anything at all that should have brought this down on them.
And the panic escalated.
The publicity of the killings was like a drumbeat. The more killings, the more publicity, the more fear.
Hello, my name is Detective Gil Carrillo with the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, assigned to Homicide Bureau. And the Sheriff's Department is currently conducting an investigation into a series of homicides and sexual assaults that have occurred in Los Angeles County.
I knew how vicious and violent and how vile he really was, and there was an enormous amount of pressure to stop before he hurt anybody else, even more so before he hurt somebody in my